120 years ago this week, one of East Aurora's most significant fires occurred right behind me on Main Street. Hi folks, Robert Lowell Goller here, and thank you for joining us for our weekly chats about local history. I am in front of what is today the Aurora Theatre, but back in 1905, the Aurora Theatre wasn't standing on this location. It was actually built in 1925. But 20 years earlier, the Warner Hotel, the Warner House Hotel, was standing here at this location. It was a massive 4-story hotel made of wood, which will become important as we tell the story of this hotel. And I actually have it in my book, Aurora Revisited, a picture of that massive hotel, four stories high. And I tell a little bit about it in the book, but I'll also put photos. We have some great photos before and after the fire that I'll post in the comment section, whether you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook. This hotel was built in 1872, and it was built as the Person's House Hotel, and then it went through a series of names, including the Hotel Eulalia, which apparently was named after a Spanish princess who supposedly visited East Aurora. I cannot find documentation that she visited East Aurora, but a member of the Spanish royal family who had that name did visit the United States. So I'm thinking maybe they named it in honor of that visit. In any event, in the 1890s, Mr. Warner purchased the hotel, and he modernized it, or modernized it by 1890 standards, and a 4th story was actually put on it, and so it was 4 stories high, 4 floors high, and the Mason Lodge actually met on the 4th floor. And it was the evening, similar evening to what we're having here tonight, a little bit windy at night on October 23rd, 1905, so 120 years ago this week, that a gentleman was walking down Main Street, and he looked up at the hotel and he saw flames coming out of the hotel roof. And so he walked into the lobby of the hotel, and the clerk was standing there, none the wiser. And the gentleman from out on the street came in and said, "Do you know your hotel is on fire?" And the clerk did not know that. And so he, in a panic, they called the fire departments. And I say fire departments because several fire departments, companies not only from East Aurora, but from surrounding towns, rushed to this intersection of Main and Church Street to help put out the fire. It took several hours. It was a banner headline on the front page of the East Aurora Advertiser later in the week, and that's how we know a lot of information about this particular fire. What made this fire potentially one of the most devastating in East Aurora was that it was a very windy evening, or a windy enough evening, that sparks from the fire of the hotel here were flying across the street. And today, if you look around Main Street, you see a lot of brick buildings, including this brick building behind me and the brick bank building over here. But back then, the buildings were mostly wood. The brick section here, the brick buildings along this stretch were not there. Those were put in the 1920s. And so along that section were residences, wooden residences. Over here on this side behind me here, where Head Over Heels building is today, at the time was the Opera House, another wooden structure. The bank building, the former bank building at the corner of Main and Church, which is a brick building today, but at the time, that brick building, the bank was built in 1911, so in 1905, that building would have been, the building on that lot would have been wood. So imagine there's a blazing fire in a 4-story hotel, and sparks flying all over the section of Main Street. And it threatened, as a matter of fact, even the Vidler section further down. Vidlers and the buildings along that section, which were there in 1905 during this fire. So what they did is, in addition to trying to put out the fire of the hotel, is all these fire departments, volunteer fire departments from East Aurora and in other communities surrounding East Aurora, they sprayed all these buildings, and this is according to the news reports, sprayed all the buildings surrounding the Warner House in order to prevent the sparks from igniting all of Main Street. it had the potential to burn, to take out this whole section of Main Street. Everything you see around here, all the buildings that were there at the time. And they managed to save those buildings. One of those buildings that they managed to save was at the time right here where the blue building is here. It's a law office today. That used to be the Millard Fillmore Theater, but before that, in 1905, the Millard Fillmore House, which is now a museum, it has been moved to Shear Avenue. At the time, it was right next to the Warner House, and actually in the one photograph of the fire, you can see the little house next to it. And so it was the president's house, the 13th president's house. It was sort of an unofficial landmark here. Of course, Millard Fillmore had moved out of it long before, almost a decade earlier, or a century earlier, sorry. And the Riley family lived in it. But what was interesting is a lot of Millard Fillmore's things were still in the house. Some furniture, tables, even photographs were left in the house, and the Riley family kept them in the house. Well, that house was threatened, including some of the president's possessions. And of course, that house is the only house besides the White House left of Millard Fillmore's. And today it's a National Historic Landmark. But during the fire, they were so concerned about losing the house and everything inside that a bunch of people who had shown up onto Main Street started an assembly line out of the Millard Fillmore house, and they took all the furniture and the photographs and the other items, and they just plopped them on Main Street to get them out of harm's way. So just imagine all these people helping the Riley family pull things out of the house as this fire is raging next door, and just putting the furniture in the middle of Main Street. What ended up happening is they saved the house through the efforts along with all these other buildings that were around here, and they were able to save it. So the next morning, according to the news reports, they brought everything back into the house. The Warner House was destroyed, and we have this photograph of it. The interesting photograph of after the fire, of a gentleman standing on one of the upper floors of the really damaged Warner House. So everything around it was saved. The Warner House had to be torn down. It was unsalvageable, and in its place came a garage for several years. And then after the Millard Fillmore house was moved once back toward what is today Millard Fillmore Place, appropriately, they built the Millard Fillmore Theatre, which is this building here, in the 1910s. 1925, the lot of the Warner House, the Warner Hotel, was replaced by the Aurora Theatre. So thanks to the efforts of our fire department back in 1905, we were able to save Main Street, what could have been one of the most devastating fires here on Main Street of East Aurora. But thanks to the efforts of the East Aurora Fire Department back in 1905, we were able to preserve all these buildings. An interesting part of that, though, is that the Opera House, which stood right here, was saved during the 1905 fire, only to burn down itself 3 years later. In 1908, a fire had started behind it and burned that building down. So within 3 years, we had two fires on the same intersection that really changed how this intersection looked. But because of the efforts of the fire department and the volunteers that came that day, we saved the rest of Main Street, including buildings that are no longer here, and that block down there that includes Vidler's. So that was a really important part of that. One of the interesting things they talked about during that 1905 fire is our human nature has not changed much. So people came to watch. Some people came to help, but most people came to gawk at the firefighting effort. And so they said at least 1,000 people showed up. It was such a big fire that people from all over came to gather. And just imagine, the fire went way overnight into the next morning. The people being here gathered right behind me here to watch this fire of the Warner House fire. So one of the biggest fires in East Aurora's history, but it could have been a lot worse. and it was saved thanks to the fire department that was around back then, and they've been preserving East Aurora, saving East Aurora structures for more than a century. So thank you for joining me for our weekly chats. I'm here at night on Main Street outside the Aurora Theatre, the former location of the Warner House Hotel, which burned this week in 1905.